Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Batman Returns, brought to us by Konami. While there was many video game adaptations for Batman Returns, all of which ended up being different from one another, some by different developers and others by different publishers, Batman Returns for Super Nintendo is considered by many the best home version of Batman Returns. So here we go with Batman Returns for the Super Nintendo. Right off the bat, I love the Konami logo that then kind of fades with the snow kind of coming in first and then going away into the black background, the snow coming down, and the opening storyline before we get to the main title screen. After a rather lengthy opening just to get to the title screen, once we are there, I'm going to start off by heading over to the options menu. Now, I will be playing the game on the highest difficulty. The thing that only really changes, though, is the amount of damage you end up taking from enemies. You can also change how many lives you have before, of course, it's a game over, and if you actually use the second player controller, you can actually do a few extra settings, including giving yourself more overall continues. However, once we got our difficulty set, we're going to jump into the first level after another little opening. Batman Returns is broken up into 7 different levels. Most levels have multiple different segments to them. You have the more 3D open area beat-em-up style where you're able to move up and down amongst the actual level's plane, and you'll actually also have 2D segments where Batman can only move left or right. Still the same kind of beat-em-up action during those segments, but it does change things up. And then there's even a Batmobile level later on in the game where you can control the Batmobile and fire at all sorts of enemies that get in your path. If you are familiar with most beat-em-ups, you'll probably feel right at home as soon as you start up the game. You'll have your basic punch combo that you're going to be using to your advantage, as well as getting close to enemies. You'll be able to grab them and beat them up some more. Chaining your combos to deliver a couple of hits, then a grab, and then into a slam will always net you the most amount of damage. One of the other changes and advantages that Batman has, though, is he does have a few gadgets at his disposal, including the Batarangs, which you can throw from a distance in order to stun enemies, and also knock certain enemies off the motorcycles. Batman Returns features an okay assortment of various enemies. The motorcycle skull guys, which appeared in the movie, all the clowns and circus-like guys end up appearing in the game, did make some sort of appearance in the movie, but definitely not in the amount of numbers that they end up appearing during the course of the game. While not much use in the 3D-like areas, Batman also does have a grappling hook that you'll have to use in more 2D styles of levels. And unlike a lot of beat-em-ups, you actually have a block button. Holding L or R will actually allow Batman to block and be able to take just a smidge of damage instead of the full-blown damage you would normally take. The higher the difficulty, like I mentioned earlier though, will dictate how much damage you end up taking from the enemies. Another cool few things that you can do, though, is hold up after grabbing an enemy. You can actually throw them into the walls, as long as there is a building or a wall above you, as well as if you grab an enemy and you're close to another enemy, you'll actually headbutt those two enemies together. Throughout the course of the game, you will find Batman point bonuses as well as health in the form of hearts that you'll see randomly scattered about, which will replenish some of Batman's health. But with the amount of damage we're going to be taking on this difficulty, it won't replenish everything. The good thing is, though, you do gain your health back after the course of completing a stage. Like most beat-em-up, strategy is going to come into the way that you approach each of the different types of enemies and learning what moves they're going to be able to do to you, whether it be a flying jumping move or a projectile from the opposite side of the screen. Knowing that you can hit them and lock them into a combo once they finish certain moves, like the big jumping guys here, that as soon as they end up bouncing a couple of times on the ground, you can easily run up to them and deliver a few hits. These guys on the bikes are a little bit tougher. I always prefer throwing the Batarangs at them than actually doing the jump kicks, but either strategy will work. Especially if you played other beat-em-ups, your probably first instinct will be to jump kick them in order to knock them off the bikes. Now, after that first segment, we now go to the first of the 2D segments. Here, we can only move left and right. We no longer can go up and down in the area we are, so it changes up the strategy a bit, especially with the big, giant, tall guys that are consistently throwing fire. Now, you can defeat these guys, but usually I like to wait and just kind of go underneath them, especially the ones during this segment, though later ones will change up depending upon the area that I'm in. The big guys here that were really a breeze during most of the 3D areas are much more of a pain because they, of course, are going to jump in, and with very little room for you to go, you kind of have to make sure that you're far enough away that you'll be able to grab them and hit them. Right after you end up attacking the guy here, he immediately will let go of his hostage and start attacking you. Following the strategy of throwing the Batarangs at him from a distance, and then when you get him low on health, you want to use your test tube in order to defeat him. The test tube is kind of the kill-all move that will damage enemies greatly, destroying and killing most normal enemies in a single one, but at least delivering quite a bit of damage to the bosses. You only have 3 test tubes per level, and usually I wait to use them on the boss of a particular stage, though if for some reason you're being overwhelmed by normal enemies, you can always use it earlier than that. They won't defeat a boss instantly, even if you have all 3. The key is getting the boss down to a certain amount of health, and then using the test tubes in order to finish them off as quickly as possible. After a level, you'll usually be met with a cutscene before moving into the next stage. Level number 2 will start off with one of the 3D segments and a lot more of the same enemies that we've been battling. Quickly comboing and if possible slamming them into one another is definitely the best way to take care of them. You can deliver a couple of hits to one, and if you can do that combo of butting heads with them, you'll be able to do a good amount of damage. Just a few more steps in though, in the second set of enemies, you will have a new enemy, the juggling enemy, that will be a little bit more of a pain than just your simple clowns that we've already been beating up. But overall, you can still get close to them and attack them relatively easily. One of the most devastating enemy weapons, though, that you'll have to deal with from this point on in the game, though, is the bombs. There's a bunch of enemies, some will be off to the side and throw the bomb, other ones kind of carry it with them in the battle and end up dropping it when you end up hitting them. Either way, if a bomb is currently on the ground or anywhere near you, you want to make sure that you're as far away from that explosion as you can, as it will do quite a lot of damage to Batman. Usually you'll notice I don't stand directly on the side of the screen left or right. I stay a little bit off of it. This way it gives distance for the enemy to come back on the screen so that I'm then able to go right into another combo. Usually I'll hit an enemy once or twice, then grab them and slam them before then repeating the process. The knife throwing guys you'll want to immediately try to take out as soon as they end up appearing. Just like some of the other ones, they will have projectiles that will try to end up hitting you. As long as you're not on the same exact plane of view from them, they won't be able to hit you with their knives, but either way, kind of go at them from a bottom or below perspective and then get close to them in order to get them into one of those combos. A lot of the early knife thrower guys, thankfully, also don't have a ton of health, so they're usually pretty easy to take down. Thankfully, I was able to notice one of the bomb guys here, and you can actually hit him and knock the bomb backwards off screen, so that way I don't have to really deal with it, and that's what I'm going to be doing for a lot of these guys during this part. Unfortunately, I can't do that with the ones that are above me when I end up getting to the same part of the screen as them, so I'll have to wait for them to throw the bomb, get away from it, and then move in for my attack. Another new enemy introduced in this level is the Fire Clowns. These guys have a giant pitchfork that they will try to hit you with, and it has a pretty good reach and distance, so try to approach them like we do with a lot of the enemies from above or below if possible in order to try to deliver those hits to them. The second segment of the level is another 2D segment inside of the shopping mall or shopping area, and here you'll have to deal with some of the clowns on the escalator as you're working your way up, including the giant bouncing clowns, which is just hilarious to see while they're coming down the escalator at you. When you make it to the elevator here, you'll have some civilians end up running out and trying to run away, but you'll also have to deal with a couple of clowns. Thankfully, you can't hit the civilians during these segments, so you don't have to worry about like hitting one and losing health or losing a life or something because you ended up hitting an innocent person. A little bit ways over though, there will be an explosion with the glass breaking and fire going at the top of the screen, and then you'll continue along your path here with now fire coming down. Here's where we're going to be using the grappling hook for the first time. I recommend standing here and doing a little short jumps and knocking away this fire clown that's standing there before trying to attempt to go over. Take a couple of steps and lure the enemies out so that when they spawn you'll be able to take them out without having to worry about fighting them while also dealing with the flames. Since we haven't used the grappling hook yet, it can be a little bit awkward, but it doesn't take too much to get the hang of it in order to try to move back and forth and avoid the enemies. When you get to the far right though, you will break through the ground and then you'll be able to continue on. I don't actually have to take out this guy before reaching the end of the area and moving on to the next part. At the beginning here, you'll have the bazooka and the sword guy introduced. The sword guy, like the pitchfork enemy, will be able to hit you from a good distance with the sword, but much more deadly is the bazooka guys. These guys will fire and then usually go right off screen and go away, but if you're able to get close to them, you can take them out with a nice quick combo. That bazooka fire, though, will damage you quite a bit, and since it can sometimes sneak up from you from behind, from the other side of the screen where you're not, you always have to be on the lookout for them. Throughout the course of the game, you're going to fight plenty of the big fat clowns that will consistently do their big jumping from the sides, and it can actually be quite easy to get hit by multiple ones, and with us playing on a harder difficulty, even one single jump from one of these guys can take away quite a bit of our health. Be careful over here, as you'll have a couple more of the random citizens there, but also one of the clowns that will immediately try to launch a bomb towards you. Then just beat up the normal ones, of course. When you do so, someone will try to cartwheel their way off screen, but if you wait for them just for a few moments, they will come back. There is a couple more of the bomb-throwing clowns, though, that will come here, so be careful and mindful of those guys from the side, so be a little bit away from the wall like normal, so you'll be able to see which ones are coming your way, so you'll be able to get into those combos. Overall, this is a relatively long segment here before we actually get to the second stage boss. There is a little bit of health that we can gather, but there's also plenty of the bazooka clowns, so be very mindful of these guys. Teaming up, of course, to do the headbutt between two of them will help you out, as you will have a bunch of them coming from the background, from the building, as well as from the sides. Over here, you'll notice a big guy in the background reading a newspaper. He is the boss for the stage. After defeating a group of enemies, he will tear the newspaper and then try to attack you. The thing about this boss is there's always going to be two other clowns with him. They just keep spawning, so for the most part, only deal with them if you have to, especially if you can get them tied together so you can do that headbutt move, and then focus most of your assault on him. As you're doing damage, of course, you'll notice that his health bar stays green for a while. It won't actually go down, but eventually it will turn yellow so that you'll know that you're doing damage. Sometimes if you get all three of the enemies on screen at one time, you may want to use a test tube. You will be able to at least knock two of those enemies away. Moving in diagonally from the bottom is a good strategy in order to get close to the strongman, so you can normally grab him and throw him down to the ground for a good amount of damage. Weaken him a bit, and then finish him off with the test tubes once he gets down to the orange or yellow bar, and once he goes down, you'll be moving on to level number 3. Now level number 3 has you starting off outside of a building, and it's another one of the 2D segments. As it moves up, you will have enemies coming at you from the windows, breaking through the glass and then coming at you. If you time your punches and attacks correctly, you can immediately knock these enemies right off the platform that you're currently on, and you won't have to do anything more to them. Be very careful though with the fat guys that pop out though, because they are immediately going to try to sit on you as they fly out the windows. After you make it to the top, you will have to grapple hook over to the next one of these platforms, and then it too will also begin to rise, and you'll repeat the process of trying to knock some of the enemies off. Using your batarangs can definitely help you be able to hit some of the ones a little bit farther. Eventually the platform will reach the end at the top and you'll be moved on to the next area. Here is another one of the 2D segments, and this time you'll have a bit of platforming that you're going to have to deal with as well. There are platforms that will end up breaking. You can use your grappling hook to help you swing across the gaps. Landing on this platform in particular is a good idea, because not only do you get another test tube, but you also get a heart to replenish some of the health you may have lost during the previous areas. Take out the fire-throwing clown from a distance if you can, then grapple hook your way over to this platform and then quickly get away from the edge so that you don't end up getting the flame guy hitting you as you're standing near that edge. All the way to the very far right though, the beam that you're standing on will start to go upwards. Stay on the far right side though, because a bomb will immediately drop once it does start going up. You'll have a variety of enemies, including the bazooka guys, as well as the big tall guys, and more bombs as well that will explode after only a second or so of them hitting the ground, so keep an eye out for them. Using the batarang from the distance will definitely help you take out some of the guys. You can just walk past this guy right here. Once you've made it to the top of the platform, has stopped, you can proceed over to the right. Use the grappling hook. You can use it a couple of times in order to try to work your way down just enough to grab that heart. But it is a bit risky to grab that extra bit of health, but you're going to need it because the next boss that we're about to do, Catwoman, is arguably the hardest fight in the entire game. Catwoman has a pretty distinct pattern that will take a little bit of getting used to as far as being able to slam her down and then being able to get into other moves. If she's using the whip, you can move up or down away from it. Her deadliest move is when she dashes quickly back and forth, usually in a Z-like pattern, as she will work towards wherever you are. If you're on the top portion of the screen, she'll move up, or if you're at the bottom, she'll move down. However, at the end of this cycle, you'll get the opportunity to move in, deliver a couple of hits, and then slam her down. Comboing a couple of attacks at the beginning of each of these grabs will help you do more damage to her, but as you've seen how much damage she was able to do to me, she can deliver quite a punch. If you haven't used any of the test tubes during the course of the level, you should have 4 of that extra one that we were able to grab, so use all 4 of them once her health bar gets into that orange, and you have gotten past one of the toughest parts of Batman Returns. Now the next area has you inside of a dark building, going back to the 3D perspective here, where you'll be able to move much more around, but you'll still be battling the same kind of clown enemies that we've been battling throughout the course. It's a bit rough to see though because of the dark atmosphere here though, but it gives a nice look to the level overall. While the area does have that cool atmosphere to it with the shadows and just the overall darkness, the enemies you're fighting are just those same normal ones, so you shouldn't have too much trouble making it through the area. After battling through a couple of sets of enemies in this area, you'll go to another room that's a slightly different lighting structure, but still pretty much the same thing. The only problem is you'll have a little bit tougher enemies, including the fire clowns as well as the sword swallowers that you'll have to deal with. The hit range on these guys, you'll always want to try to get in close to them as soon as they come out before they're able to even get an attack off. And you always want to approach from either above or below so that when their fire spewing comes out or they're trying to poke you with the stick, of course, they will end up missing. Just like we did in the previous room, after just a few sets of enemies, you'll go through another opening and you'll end up in an area very similar to the first area here, except you will notice the girl in the background, and then Catwoman will attack you once again. Now, this isn't as tough usually for me as the first battle with Catwoman, but it's still a very similar battle. Getting the exact timing to be able to choose when you can move in and actually deliver hits to her is the key. She'll do a dash forward with her claw, usually afterwards you'll be able to run up and grab her, and you'll also be able to catch her vulnerable when she gets done a series of the cartwheels. Now, unlike the other battle we just had against Catwoman in the previous level, this one is not the boss of the stage, so we're not going to use our test tubes in order to defeat her. This makes things a little bit tougher, since there is the boss of the stage coming up right after this fight pretty much. It's best to try to save your test tubes for that, but of course if you get in a pinch, you can always use them to try to help you out. Once we're finally able to dodge enough of Catwoman's moves and put her down, we move on to the next part of the stage. Right outside, you'll see the woman on the ledge, as well as the Penguin will take flight with his umbrella. Penguin will fly overhead in an interesting boss fight, one of my actual favorites ones in this game. He'll also be dropping random other umbrellas that explode down on you, so as long as you're able to get in between and get away from him, you shouldn't have too much problem dodging. When he throws umbrellas to the right or left, they will go off screen and come back below you, and you'll have to kind of jump up and duck under certain ones. A little bit of timing, as you do have enough space between each of the umbrellas for you to be able to dodge and avoid taking damage. When he goes off screen and starts coming back from the other side, be prepared and launch out some batarangs, and keep doing this, jumping in the air until eventually you lower his health down enough so that the test tubes can be a little bit more effective. Of course, you can use them at any point during the fight, but I always like to use them once I actually see his health bar deplete. The good thing is you can also use the test tubes like I am here in order to dodge the umbrellas that come flying from the left or right side, and timing it here, I was almost able to take him out fully with those test tubes and avoided accidentally getting hit. Once he drops though, that is the end of stage 4, and we move on to the 5th stage of the game. Stage number 5 is the Batmobile level. Now, during this stage, a lot of the enemies you don't actually have to defeat. There is a lot of enemies during the course of this level. Sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming to the eyes with just how much is exactly going on, but it's still pretty cool the way they were able to do this level back in the day. You'll be moving the Batmobile left and right, trying to get in between and around all of the motorcycle enemies. Standing directly behind them, you should be able to hit them, but at the same time, you'll have to watch out for smoke bombs or grenades or whatever they are that they are throwing behind them. If you run directly into one of the bikers or one of their projectiles, of course, ends up hitting you, you'll take some damage, but it is relatively lenient when it comes to the amount of damage you end up taking during this stage, as opposed to a lot of damage we take from a single hit during the other ones. During the course of the level, there is some things to pick up, like the extra point logos, so if you want to build up that score, and of course by building up enough score you will also gain extra lives, so it's always worthwhile to try to go after some of those. You'll notice, of course, most of the time, I'm not really trying to take out a lot of the enemies here because there just is so many. I'm much more concerned with just trying to get around and dodge as many of the enemies as I possibly can, but it can be really difficult with the hit detection to be able to dodge all of the enemies together. After a few more sets of enemies, you'll have another set of the points to gather along the way before you'll make it to the boss fight, which is the giant campaign van. You'll have regular motorcycle guys as well during the course of this, but our main focus is destroying the boss, because once it's done, we'll be able to complete the stage. Keep firing as much as possible and stay behind the campaign van for the most part. It will sometimes hit the brake a little bit or move backwards, and sometimes it will throw out dynamite from its back as well. Try to do your best to avoid the dynamite, but it can still be rather rough, and our main focus is still attacking the actual van. It won't take too long, though, for you to start doing some real damage to it, and once you get to that final health bar, it shouldn't take too long to drain it and be able to move on to the next level of the game. Stage number 6 is the Circus train stage, and you'll be battling on top of the various Circus train cars. And during the course of the level, you will have some motorcycle guys that will come up from the side and try to throw stuff at you while you're doing it, but you will be battling, for the most part, a lot of the same enemies that we have been fighting, such as a lot of the fat clowns. Try to bunch them up if you can to do the headbutt move to them, but overall, as long as you're able to avoid their giant jump and bouncing, you shouldn't have too much trouble. Anytime the knife-throwing enemies appear on screen, they don't usually chase you down too much or try to get on the exact plane, but if they are on that same line of sight as you, they will of course immediately try to throw one of their knife projectiles at you, and the same goes for the juggler clown as well. Not too far in, though, you will start to see those motorcycle guys, which get real annoying because they just keep throwing bombs onto the train, and you just have to keep avoiding them, as you're not going to be able to take out those guys. The only thing good is if enemies end up getting close to some of the bombs, they will go off and actually end up hurting them as well. But your main focus is to try to dodge the bombs and then take out the enemies, enough of them to defeat it, and you'll be able to scroll the screen a little bit. Using those bombs to your advantage, though, sometimes can be very useful for getting through those areas just a tad bit quicker. After you make it a little bit farther in, you'll have to not only deal with bombs sometimes, you kind of find an extra bonus point, but you also have to deal with the various obstacles that you'll have to jump over while riding on top of the train. The only thing good is it does hit the enemies just like the bombs, so a lot of times enemies will just stand there and it'll run right into them to help you out, and it does do a fair amount of damage to them, so focus on jumping and avoid accidentally getting hit and let that take out the enemies. It won't take them all out, though. Some enemies, like the Thing Clowns here, do sometimes actually like to jump over it and actually dodge it, which is kind of cool, but most of the enemies it just runs right into. One move that is very helpful as well if you're willing to risk the health, though, is if you press the attack and jump button together, you will do the cape swipe, which will do a good amount of damage to any normal enemy, but you do lose health for doing it. it's something that I hadn't mentioned because I don't usually do it because health is at such a premium, especially when you're playing on higher difficulties. But if you're on the lower ones, you may want to use a bit of that in order to help you out. At the end of the train, though, there is some health. Be sure to grab it before going all the way over. The train will eventually come to a stop, and you'll move on to the next part of the level. Now here you'll immediately notice the little monkey jumping in the background, and then the organ grinder boss will appear. Thankfully, this guy is a lot easier than his NES counterpart, which for a long time as a kid was the absolute bane of my existence, as I had so much trouble beating that boss on the NES version of Batman Returns. Here, for the most part, he's just going to try to run at you. He does have a good amount of health, but we can use the other clowns here in order to do the headbutt bash in order to take out quite a bit of his health every time he tries to get near me. So you'll notice usually I try to grab a clown and then try to get close to the organ grinder in order to try to do that headbutt. Every so often, though, the organ grinder will actually start to fire his gun, especially once he gets a little bit lower in health. So he'll go to one of the far sides and start firing at you, but he fires in a straight line. The fire can actually hit the other enemies that are trying to battle you, and for the most part, you're able to easily get around it and get to him in order to grab him and do a little bit of damage. Once you get that health a bit low, though, of course, use your test tubes if you want to in order to try to deliver quite a bit of damage, but once he is done, we move on to the 7th and final stage of Batman Returns. Stage number 7 is the final level, and it starts off immediately with a bunch of thing clowns throwing bombs at you, so be prepared for that. Getting close to them, they'll usually just kind of throw them right over your head. But after you take out just a couple of these guys, though, you will start to get attacked by not only more bomb guys, but also the bazooka guys. This is the end of Penguin's army here, so they're going to throw everything they have at you during the course of the level. As you make it farther in, you'll have some of the tougher enemies in the game have bigger groups of them, like the fire clowns, for instance here. Trying to grab them, get them close to one another so I can do that headbutt is always essential to try to clear them out a little bit faster. But overall, since they do move relatively slow, it's not hard to go from left to right, dodge their fire, and be able to hit them. The occasional motorcycle guy will, of course, try to get in my way, but thankfully a nice batarang will take them out. A little bit ways into the level, though, you do get the penguins, the soldiers of the penguin, in the background and foreground. The animated sprite of the penguins, especially in the foreground, actually looks like they're talking to one another or just moving their beaks. Overall, is a nice touch. The problem is, though, they add the hazard of missiles into the battle. So not only are you battling the same kind of clowns and all that you've been fighting, you'll also have random amounts of missiles that will be shot at by these penguins to try to damage you some more. Thankfully, it's not a continual thing, so after a group of them end up going off, you can fight a group of enemies and then continue on, and then another set of missiles will come in after that. You'll notice, of course, that which missiles haven't landed yet, though, because the penguins in the foreground and background, you can kind of see the missiles, especially the ones in the foreground, so you know what's coming your way. If you were able, though, to survive all the battles that we've had up to this point, you shouldn't have too much trouble getting through this, even with the missiles. If you're getting low on health and you absolutely need to, you can use the test tubes to, of course, dodge some of the fire that's coming your way. Thankfully, though, the rockets do end up damaging enemies, just like a lot of the other projectiles and other hazards that we have to deal with. They also do end up damaging those foes, so you can use that to help you out a little bit. Late into the level, you will find a very small heart to replenish some of the health you may have lost during the missile barrage that's been going on, and eventually you will run out of penguins in the background and only have the ones in the foreground. Make sure that you do grab the extra test tube that the bat is carrying here so that we can have 4 of them going into the final boss encounters. Just like level 4, there is not just one, but there is 2 bosses for us to deal with in the course of the level, so we don't have to use the test tubes on them. The first boss is a little bit different, though, and one of the more interesting bosses that you have to face in the game. After defeating finally the last group of enemies, we get a screen transition. Now we're in a 2D area where we have to battle the giant duck vehicle. It'll go up and you'll get close to it, jump onto the platform that it's on, and it will actually try to squish and come down on you. Use your batarangs and attacks in order to damage it when it's doing this. Every so often, though, it'll only go a little bit up and do a whole group of missile barrage towards you, so be cautious of this. You will eventually have to get to the opposite side of it, though, and do the same strategy of jumping into it, allowing it to come down, and when it does, deliver a few hits to it, and then continue to dodge the missile barrages when they do come down. Once you get the rhythm of being able to get dodging through this and be able to actually hit the vehicle, it shouldn't take too long before it's defeated, and you'll move on to the actual final boss encounter against the penguin. This fight's a lot different than the first one, and you have only small opportunities to deliver a lot of your hits. You want to make sure that you don't get too close to him on certain occasions, especially right when he stands up after being slammed to the ground. He will run on the ground, he will stop and use his umbrella to fire bullets directly at you, as well as he also will fly around the screen sometimes. He, of course, being the final boss, has the most health, so try to be cautious and stay away from him when possible. Use batarangs to hit him from a distance, especially when he's doing a barrage of umbrellas to the ground that keep exploding, as it'll be hard to actually get close to him in order to hit him. When you do get those opportunities to get in close, make sure that you maximize your combos with a few hits and then the slam down, and it won't take too long to start bringing the health down at least a little bit. Getting those key moments to be able to get in there and grab him, especially when he's on his barrage of umbrella explosions, is the toughest part of this fight. If you didn't use any of the test tubes, though, once he gets low on health, finish him off using all 4 of the ones that we picked up during the course of the stage, and then you can sit back and enjoy the ending to Batman Returns.
After the just kind of okay ending to the game, we of course then get our credit screen. There isn't a different ending for playing on higher difficulties. There is a final screen at the end of the credits though that is different depending upon which one of the difficulties you ended up completing the game on, and it's really nothing spectacular in itself. While far from a perfect beat-em-up, some people I know don't really like the 2D style of areas, which I don't really overall mind too much, and the fact that it's only single player as it's based on Batman Returns, so you can only play as Batman. It would have been odd to have another character that you would have been able to play as, but heck, maybe they could have just done 2 Batmans. I don't know, something happened weird and somebody else was playing Batman for a little bit, since of course it was before Robin was introduced to the film universe. But either way, it's still a very fun beat-em-up that's worth going back, especially the sprite work overall, the very large sprites, some good music from the Konami team based on some of the music actually from the film, and overall it's just a great licensed game for the SNES, especially during eras when there wasn't that many great licensed games, and this version of Batman Returns does stand out over a lot of the other versions that were released, especially the counterpart on the Sega Genesis. After being at the presented by Konami screen for a bit of time, you'll again get one final screen where you see Batman and it'll say, "You are true Dark Knight." And that's all you get special for doing the game on the Maniac difficulty. But in the end though guys, that will wrap up this episode of Play It Through. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving me a thumbs up or commenting down below. If you enjoyed Batman Returns, a great licensed Batman game, check out one of the worst ones, Batman Forever, that I did for the Super Nintendo a few years back. I also need to thank all the members of my Patreon. You guys and your continued monthly support does keep this channel going. If you want to help out, just click the little Patreon button down below. But anyway guys, thank you so much for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.